you probably have to be reminded of it. You have to have, supporters that are whispering the right messages in your ear and, encouraging you when times are tough, to stick it out, or also providing you with the guidance to say, hey, I've heard you talk about this for a long time, and the challenge that you're having right now isn't novel. Like this is, again, it's a consistent set of feedback. So yeah, it's not genetic. I think it's the environment that you're in that plays a big role there. And you're right, it does take guts sometimes to pull the cord. And again, I go back to the initial statements when I talked about, it starts with adventure, like follow your bliss, pay attention to what you're good at, pay attention to how you're feeling about it. I'm guessing the case with Jake was that while he was an elite diver, he just wasn't feeling that passion or that flow.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for listening. Feel free to subscribe and share with your friends. We've got a special one for you today. We have my little brother, Jerome Stewart. Jerome's got a different path than I do. He went the corporate route. I went the entrepreneurial route, but we both got to ring the bell on the New York Stock Exchange. And how many people do you know that the two kids in the family both got to do that? Jerome went to the Peace Corp. What an amazing experience that was, that launched him into Microsoft, Salesforce, Splunk, and Dynatrace. He approaches everything with a craftsman approach and says, if it's worth doing, honor yourself and your opportunity and do it well. He's had a career of adventure, of trying things. And he says, give it a shot and stick it out for at least a year. It is my pleasure to have my brother, Jerome, on the call. Welcome to the Edge of Excellence. Well, today is a special day, Jerome Stewart. I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but I really appreciate you taking time away from your family, away from your passion of mountain biking and hiking and swimming and writing books, and definitely away from your amazing career to share insight into the younger Jeromes and Matts of the past. Thank you for making time for being on the Edge of Excellence.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Matt. This is a special opportunity for me as well. And I think your introduction was about 80% accurate. So that's a good start.
Well, I don't aim for accuracy. And as we get started, it's interesting when you have two brothers that are so completely different. Jerome is here. He does not have the same path of life as I have. He definitely is much more polished. Jerome is the corporate executive epitome of what you want to be if you're heading off to work for a company like Microsoft or Salesforce. Jerome worked for them both and had high-level careers. If you want to join the corporate world and you don't really like the way I sound and you wish I was more polished and you wonder how I even got a podcast, today is your day. But Jerome, even though you're my brother, we're going to start off the same way we always start off. What is your definition of excellence?
Wow. And again, I like the introduction. I'm really happy to carry the flag for the members of the corporate community on this call. I think that it's a really tremendous career path for many people, and it sometimes isn't positioned that way. So I'm looking forward to digging into that with you. But my definition of excellence, I really like that question, and you gave it to me in advance, and I've been thinking about it. What really popped into my head initially is what I'm going to share, and it's just this concept of, I guess I'll refer to it as kind of a craftsman's approach. And maybe the better way for me to describe what I'm thinking is to give you an example, and it's this. So, like, if you walk into a building and you just think it's very nicely designed, or if you're yourself a craftsperson and you're creating something and it's constructed well, really high quality, and you take a step back and you say, wow, I did that really well, that's excellence. And I think we as individuals, we know when we're doing something well, we know when we're not putting enough time into it. And so I'm talking about excellence is when you're in that flow and you're taking the time, you're working hard, and you have the skill to do something well. You know it. That's excellence. And it's a little bit different than saying, it's how much money you make or how many, people are reading whatever it is that you created or making it to your website or whatever. Those are interesting metrics, but excellence is really it's quality, 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 quality.
Wow. Okay. So you can be excellent at mountain biking if you're eating well and you have commitment and you're working hard and you're taking the time. One day you can get there. You can be excellent in work, obviously. How does that apply to being a little brother?
That's excellent. Well, have I been an excellent little brother? I don't know. I think we push each other. I think that, part of getting to the, gaining the skills, gaining the experience comes from trying, failing, recognizing your mistakes. And I think sibling relationship is, not always the easiest way to do that, but I think we do definitely give each other feedback and, quick feedback, raw feedback. The essence of what we try to do in business happens in families just, innately, like there's no filters. So yeah, I think, I think we help each other become excellent through the feedback that we provide and also through the support, hopefully. If it's all negative feedback, which definitely does not exist between the two of us, but in any relationship, if you need to balance the constructive feedback with direct feedback.
Okay. So we are on this recording together today, not because we thought of this before, not because we were super aware of what a great guest you would be. We're on the call today because we had a little side conversation the other day, and we were talking about reactions to excellence. And we were a little disappointed in some reactions by others to our own excellence. And you let me know that you were going to ring the bell on the New York Stock Exchange, and we were commiserating on how excellent are our parents. 2 kids, and both of them will have rung the bell on the New York Stock Exchange. But long before you were chief of staff at Microsoft, long before you went to the Peace Corps after a degree at Tulane, long before I went to your graduation at NYU Stern School of Business, long before Salesforce, Splunk, Dynatrace, you were in high school. And I got to let everybody else know what you were like in high school. Now, I remember prior to high school, sitting with my BB gun, shooting at you and your friends through the courtyard window as you came home from school, which I definitely don't think was excellent. I remember learning my management skills, which I had to relearn from fighting with you in the hallway with bullwhips that our parents were dumb enough to buy us in Mexico. I remember the excellent work we did patching holes in the walls of our home after numerous fights, because our father told us that when he was a kid, his parents would have never known about the fights because he would have had the holes patched and the walls painted. I remember that, but the other people listening here today don't. So why don't you, with your own words and your own recollection, tell us what you were like in high school before you found these careers and before you made these marks? What was life like, and how did you find your path?
I didn't know that you were going to bring up those examples, but you encouraged me to, I don't know, maybe take a slightly different approach to the answer than I might have normally done, that just because you're reminding me of a few things. I recall, I bizarrely, I recall many of those circumstances fondly, BB guns and bullwhips. But why am I recalling them fondly? It's just that we had, to a certain extent, an untethered childhood. Like we were encouraged to be adventurous and to try new things. And we lived in an environment that enabled that too. Living in the desert with a lot of open space, you could get out and about. And that's definitely something when I think back, to my life growing up in New Mexico, but my life today too. I think this concept of pursuing adventure is a seed that was planted way back then, and I've attempted to carry it forward, into my adult life. And so, thanks for reminding me of those examples. They're actually fond memories, surprisingly. But your question was, what was I like as a high schooler?
What was life
It's
like? How
What
did
was
you
life
see
like?
yourself? How did you find
Yeah,
this path into the tech world?
yeah. Well, again, I definitely didn't leave high school knowing, like, hey, I'm gonna become, an executive at a technology company. That's just a very precise outcome that when I was 18, I don't think I had a clue, to be honest. But I think I started building my path in some ways subconsciously. And I think that concept of adventure is something that I grabbed onto, and it helped differentiate me. But how did I see myself as a high schooler? I have some recollection of that. And there were some thoughts that were pretty clear at the time. And it was just this concept that I wanted to try a lot of different things. And I put a bit of time into a lot of things, as opposed to, let me pick one thing and just, saturate that. So I dabbled. I was a decent student, a decent athlete, a decent student leader. I was the treasurer of my high school. I was involved in a lot of activities. I worked. We had to work. And so, I had all of these, let's think of them as maybe little, vessels, and you can fill them up with time. And I probably had a few more than maybe, your average kid. But that helped me learn a little bit more about myself. What was I good at? What did I want? What did I want to do? What did I not want to do? And I think I left high school with just a broader perspective because of that. But again, certainly didn't have an understanding of precisely what I was going to do. I think I might have started to anticipate that, hey, I don't think I'm going to be a physician, but I might go into business. What does that mean? Question mark at that stage in my life.
Decent student, decent athlete,
Yeah.
decent student leader, and trying things. So, and I've heard this before with some other people, letting go of the precise outcome, maybe just enjoying the process. And Sanjay Kapoor, who I think you met,
Yep.
taught me karma yoga. If you have clarity of intention, purity of heart, and sincerity of action, let go of the outcome and enjoy the process, which is karma yoga. But you don't have clarity of intention specifically and exactly what you want to do. You just know you want to be excellent. I was at a private school, and I felt like the poor kid at the private school. So I really wanted to be wealthy. And that's kind of drove me for a while. And then I realized that doesn't matter. And I changed to, I really want to impact people, but I'm moving forward, not to a precise outcome, doing everything I can. You did the same thing as well. You try a bunch of things out while you're figuring it out. And one of the things you tried out was going to the Peace Corps. And I remember going to Tulane University for your graduation, your alma mater, and the school my son now goes to. I remember going there when you were a freshman and meeting all your fraternity brothers, and then seeing them again in interesting circumstances when you graduated. Interesting circumstances because, in case your children listen to this, we don't want to talk about those circumstances. But I remember just being impressed, right? And we're still friends with them. John Lee Nielsen,
Yeah.
Christian Granzo, Josh Kleinfelter. We're still friends with them. I'm friends with them. I didn't even go to
Yeah.
school with them, but I'm still friends with them. I still talk to them. And I remember you got a lot of crap. And the day after you graduated, we had our aunt from England there. We had our English mother. We had all our friends. You had to move out. You weren't very helpful in the move out. So we had to basically move for you. And it was the day after your graduation, so we'll cut you some slack. But you went to the Peace Corps. And I know our dad did Vista Volunteers, and I know we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Vista Volunteers, because our dad met our mother while she was on vacation with her fiance, and she dumped her fiance and married our dad weeks later. And next thing you know, we're here. So you had that in your background, but why the Peace Corps? Why? You said diversity, you said adventure. Why did you go to the Peace Corps, and how did that change your life? Because there's someone listening right now that's considering the Peace Corps, and they didn't know that you could go to the Peace Corps and then be chief of staff at Microsoft. They didn't know you could go to the Peace Corps and end up in Marin County leading a dream life. So why the Peace Corps, and how did that fit into your future?
Yeah, good question. And I do attribute a lot of my my path, I guess is the right way to say it, to those types of decisions. And again, I'm going to go back to that concept of adventure, because I think that was a driving force for me. And it wasn't really, to be honest, it wasn't this attempt to differentiate myself or to land the job. And I think some people approach, their life that way. They're very purposefully, and I applaud this too. It just wasn't me, but very purposefully lining up a series of experiences, to build out that resume. And for me, again, I had a lot of interests. I wanted to try, new things. And so I'm going to take a slight step back, and I'll get to Peace Corps, but I'll reflect again on just our relationship. So I remember even before the Peace Corps, I was looking at like, where do I want to go to college? And I had a couple options. One of them was actually UCSB, where you went to school, Matt.
You mean the Harvard of the West?
The Harvard of the West.
The greatest school on the planet?
The Harvard of the South. You're in a second place or beyond when you're saying you are the something of the something, but not the actual thing. Like, Harvard is the Harvard of the Harvard.
No, Harvard is the UCSB of the East.
I know. We play that game too. But anyway, when I was deciding, UCSB is an amazing university, and especially now that I live in California, I see that the quality of students that are going there, it's tremendous. I had that opportunity. The reason why I didn't do it, Matt, was because, some advice that I received from our grandmother, and it's just that cliche advice, do things differently. The Robert, Frost, poem, two paths. And, very much so that's how I felt I needed to drive my life at the time, was to try a different path. I didn't want to follow the path that you were following. So I moved to New Orleans, which was very different coming from Albuquerque. So that was a start. And then, I had a wonderful time in New Orleans. Great that you remember it that way too. Amazing friends. Still, I'd probably call them, my best friends. After 2 years of doing that, which was really a peak for me in my life at the moment, I felt like I was on top of my life, on top of the world at that time. I decided to pursue an adventure. I decided to mix things up. I went to Spain, and not Spain for a couple of weeks. I went to Spain for a full year. And at that time, it was freaky for me to do that, to go to an environment where my language skills were pretty horrible at the time. But I wanted to give it a shot. So I moved to Spain, learned a ton, came out, able to speak the language at a reasonable level, understand the language, read literature and things like that. So went back to school, finished my degree, and I decided to continue with that type of international experience or international adventure. And I wanted to also, hopefully have some impact, which is, I think in retrospect, I now would say the impact that you have as a Peace Corps volunteer is often on a micro level. You're not necessarily impacting the country, international relations, but you can impact a person. You can impact yourself. And I think Peace Corps was a great opportunity for me to experience a different way of living. So anyway, that's what brought me to the Peace Corps.
So the Peace Corps, though, how did the Peace Corps, just the experience, and I'm not talking about being courageous enough to face your friends and say, no, shut up. I'm not talking about being courageous enough to face the ambiguous outcome. I'm talking about what was it that you got out of that changed who you are and put you on top of the tech world and has you ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange?
Yeah, so I personally got a lot out of it, which I can talk about, but I definitely think just from like a raw, CV perspective and how do you actually stand out, I think, just having United States Peace Corps on my resume as I'm applying to business school at the time, that was different. And, there's a lot of super smart people that are trying to, get into business schools or trying to crack into whatever the top company is. And you're reading a pile of resumes, 100 resumes. What is the thing that makes you stand out? And something like Peace Corps, I think, is a great example. So that's not why you do the Peace Corps, but I would just say that's one of those examples of a side door. And there's a series of those things that have helped me, make it to the place in life where I have the fortune to go to the New York Stock Exchange and do those types of things.
Yeah, it's clay, right? You chose a piece of clay. It could be going straight to Microsoft. It could be going to start a business. It could be going sailing around the world. It could be going to the Peace Corps. You take what's thrown at you and you made it into what got you into NYU.
Yeah, I think you deal with your circumstances for sure. And like that's what's thrown at you and you make something of that. And I applaud everybody and most people, frankly, who've had a harder time than I have in life and they've been able to make something of it. And you don't have to make a mountain for that something to be really extraordinary. So I think you're right. You got to make the most of what you have. But again, what I'm saying here is there's this concept of differentiation, like we all start off with like the same looking piece of paper, let's call it. And how do you stand out? You got to be really good at certain things. I also think you have to have experiences that make you stand out, and an experience can't be, I'm going to go dabble for a couple weeks and claim that that's monumental. It has to be something that you're going to dedicate a lot of time to. And again, Peace Corps is an example. That's a 2-year commitment. So if you're willing to, put your life on hold for a couple years, go overseas, work really hard, drink out of a well in some cases for a couple years, then I think that demonstrates that, you can stand up to some of the scrutiny or some of the hardships that, corporate America might show at you, type of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, you talked about the craftsman approach.
Yep.
Step back. Did you do it really well? Use your insight and analyze. You step back from your Peace Corps experience, you did it really well. You talk about how you need to try and fail and give yourself feedback, get feedback to figure out your path. You talk about adventure, but you also gave credit to the people that do have a specific path. I'm glad you do, because I don't. And the reason why I don't is because we become too tied to the path, but we're in the middle, right? You have to have a path. You have to have a goal. You have to have momentum and you're moving in that direction, but you also have to have that seeking adventure and that openness to possibility and that openness to serendipity to try new things. But whatever it is that you try, if you have that craftsman approach and you do the absolute best you can do, you're excellent at it. You're the person that's cleaning toilets and you are excellent at it. People notice, and it can be a stepping stone to other people. And I saw you giggle when I said cleaning toilets. You did that in the Peace Corps.
I've cleaned toilets, not only in the Peace Corps, but like almost professionally. One of my titles in my life was pool boy. It's usually not very exciting when you have the word boy actually officially in your title. And that was the case when I worked for hotels. And part of that was at the end of the day, I had to go clean toilets. So I think you got to be willing to do that. I think what that shows is work ethic. And obviously, I mean, first of all, I again applaud people who have to clean houses and, or buildings for a living. There's just a lot of honor in those jobs. But you're right that if you do that, if you do anything that you're doing, if you do it well, it doesn't mean in the case of cleaning a toilet that you're going to love it, but you're doing your job well. You take it super seriously. That is the craftsman approach. If you're writing something, write it well. Pay more attention to the quality of what you're creating than to the concept of, like I said, how many people are going to read it. That's craftsman. Whatever it is that you're doing, do it well and bring it. Bring yourself to it. I think that's a way to stand out.
Yeah, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
When I started this podcast, my friend Sean Baldwin called me up. You may remember Sean. He was the guy that we took our cousin Dan and we went and visited one of his very valuable possessions, and he gave Dan the special tour and we took a bunch of pictures and he was pretending to be the waiter. I'm not going to get into what it is, but
sure, it was fun.
Sean Baldwin called me up and he said, "Hey, heard you doing a podcast." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "It better not suck. It's going to be out there forever. People will be able to find it years from now. It better not suck." And I said, "What have I ever done that sucks, man? What have I ever done?" And that's how you approach everything. That's how I approach everything. I don't cook because I suck at cooking and my wife's a chef. But whatever I do, I don't know if it's the competitive edge, but I don't even think it's competitive. And I think it's your craftsman approach. Why do it if you're not going to do it well? Or as Terry Yates said, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. Right? And you overdid the Peace Corps. You went way above and beyond at the Peace Corps, and that was a different path to get you into one of the best business schools, to get you into American Express. We forgot about, and we forgot about Latino.com before you went to Microsoft for 19 years and ran all the sales for Windows in Europe and North Africa. These huge things happen because of that craftsman approach and everything you do. And I do appreciate, our parents worked very, very hard. There was a lot of humility in what they did. Our dad had 3 jobs when I was little: truck driver. He was doing the grain machine. He was a bus driver. He was a teacher. Our mom literally changed bedpans. She was an ER nurse, a hospice nurse. They put all that effort in and they did it well. And I was talking to another podcast guest. We were talking about giving credit to her parents because this woman just blew me away, Allie Becker, and it has blown me away every time I've ever interacted with her. I mean, we got the listener right now that's driving around in their car listening to this at 1.5 speed can pause and stop and say, where am I getting my values from? If I didn't get it at home, okay, can I get it from a mentor? Can I get it from a friend? What am I doing right now? Am I doing it well? If not, I can stop and do it well. And if I don't love doing it, but I need to do it, I still can do it well. If I don't love doing it and I don't need to do it, I can stop doing it and go find something that I'm going to do really well and really deliver my best and really be devoted to, because that's what creates excellence, and people notice, right? You can't suck because people notice.
Yeah. And so just to reflect on what you're saying, agree with the majority of it.
I want to remind you that this is my podcast and you have to agree with everything.
I know, I agree with everything. But there's a few what I would call kind of distinct points. First, we talked about the significance of, I'm going to call it adventure. And adventure is a broadly defined term. You don't have to go to Spain or Bolivia, to be on an adventure. But it's, following your passion is a cliche, but I think that's a nice reflection of adventure. You're passionate about it. It's an adventure, to try new things. The other thing that you referenced, like Latino.com, I'm glad I took on those types of experiences. That was a company that I worked for a period of time, actually starting when I was in business school. I can't really claim that as a massive success. I don't think I, moved the needle too much working for Latino.com, but it was a stepping stone for sure. And all of those stepping stones, I think something else that you learn along the way there is, if you're flowing, if you're bringing it, and if you're doing all that stuff, you're right, people will start to notice. Sometimes they don't, or sometimes, despite your effort, it's just not working. The business isn't doing super well. So I think there's another lesson here, and it's pay attention to those cues. Give it a shot. It doesn't mean that if things aren't working one day, the next day walk in and say, hey, I'm out of here. Like, that's just silly behavior. Give it an honest shake. Work at a new job for at least a year, I like to point out, but then be honest with yourself. Pay attention to the cues. Are you enjoying it? Are you flowing? Are you applying that craftsman's approach to what you're doing? Or are you asked to do things that you're just not interested in? After a year or so, you can make that self-assessment and then move. And in the case of Latino.com, I was able to move from that job to one other job, and then I got hired by Microsoft, and that just entered. It wasn't a 19-year experience, but it was a 15-year experience, which was just a wonderful experience as well as an adventure. But sometimes, again, you have to have those interim steps along the way. So I had to get that out there, Matt.
Okay. So, and one of the things we never talk about, and that's one of the purposes of this podcast, is to help expose people to what you do. So after your 19 years at Microsoft,
sure.
You went and did a few things, but it's always been in marketing, right? It's been in corporate marketing. And I don't think of marketing the same way you do, because I'm in the small business environment. And although our small business is probably more like a mid-sized business, but I still think in a small business mindset for marketing. What exactly does it mean to have the title that you have, the VP of communication at Dynatrace or the head of cloud marketing at Splunk. And I know you can't get into any specifics, but what sort of things are you doing? If someone's in the car right now and they're listening on 1.5 speed, but maybe they slowed down because we're so funny, and they just want to know, okay, what do you do day to day? Would I like that job? Can you describe what it's like?
Sure. Probably the best way to describe my current job, but also what I think has been maybe the primary skill that I bring to organizations. Maybe it's a coin with two sides. So on one side, it's there's this often overused, and I'm going to go ahead and overuse it, but word storytelling. I'm a storyteller within organizations, but what does that mean? So in a technology environment, especially the environments that I've migrated toward, these are kind of deep tech environments. These are the technologies that are powering the digital experiences that we all take for granted, our mobile phone experiences, but even on the back end, everything that's powering a company's ability to deliver services to you, technologies are behind that. These are increasingly complex technologies. My job is to understand them, to a certain degree, and then help make sense of them so that a broader audience understands them and understands the value proposition. Sometimes it's also helping to, let's call it a pitch, developing a pitch. How are we going to grab people's attention? So my job is to craft that for, in this case, a specific company, but I've done that for products and for other companies. So that's one side of the coin. I'd say the other side of the coin is to be able to do that at scale, to get other people to buy into that story, because we all have a perspective on what the story is, especially when it comes to a product or a company. Ask 10 people in your organization, what does the company do? And unless you have a nicely crafted positioning and messaging, you're going to have 10 different answers. So again, we want to unify people on that storyline. I think that's really, really important for businesses of any size. I'm biased, but I would say that that's a cornerstone to a business strategy, is to understand the positioning. So again, I get a group of people to buy into that, and then we execute it across all of the different marketing channels, which range from media relations to content creation to direct sales. Again, we all want to be humming to the same tune, which is that message. And again, I think my value is to enable larger organizations to snap to that story.
So when I think of marketing, I think, okay, you got to go buy the Super Bowl ad. So you're probably there negotiating for the Super Bowl ad. And then you got to go do the pay-per-click thing. And then you've got to get the SEO going. But that's not what it is. That's the last part. And there's other people on the team that may do that. Prior to that, it's figuring out the story, and crafting the communication with that craftsman approach. Then you've got the leader and manager side of it. So if you weren't a great leader and you weren't good at management and delegation, you couldn't have the title you have. You could be a great storyteller, but you can't be running marketing for these big organizations if you're just a storyteller and not a leader. And then the final element is what I think of, and maybe a lot of our listeners right now are thinking of what marketing is, just the execution part. But it starts way before that. And do you even get deep into the execution part?
I do. I absolutely do. And I think that's another, maybe it's just reflective of those days back in New Mexico when we were encouraged to get dirty. But I get dirty at work. I'm a writer. I'm an editor. I identify and ideate, new campaigns. I'm on the calls with people. There is a point where, due to just the scope of work, I can't be in every call. And that's something that, that creates a challenge for myself. But absolutely, I think certainly in my business, literally at the company that I work for, but I would basically say the culture that I want to be a part of, all senior people need to have that doer skill. Like you have to understand how to do certain things. You can't just be a talker delegator. That doesn't work.
So I want to get back to something that you said too. You said you have to give it the old college try, and I'm paraphrasing. You have to pay attention to the cues. But oftentimes the cues are, oh, you hate this, don't do it. And they come too early. So I remember when I started my entrepreneurial career, career by knocking on doors. That's what I did. Hi, my name's Matt Stewart. I'm going to be painting a bunch of houses in the neighborhood. I noticed your house needs to be painted. Would you like a free estimate? No, 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 no. I got no, and nobody believes this. 18 hours over 2 days. I didn't get a single person to say yes. And I hated it. Hated it. But I kept going because I knew that cue was coming too early. So, and you and I talk every now and then. We've had a bad day. I mean, both of us do what we love. I mean, I'm doing this podcast because I love working with 20 somethings. I love the impact. I have a business that does that. I have a hobby that does that, coaching my friends' kids. It's what I do. It's what I love. I helped your own kid. But I don't love it every day. I love it most days. So how do you know when the cue is just laziness? How do you know when the cue is like anti-perseverance? How do you stick in it long enough? And I remember your Peace Corps story. I believe your first day at the Peace Corps, you got giardia, fell out of your bed, and broke your nose. You could have quit that day. How do you know that it's just a blip versus a cue that you should do something else?
I don't know if there's a trigger that answers that question as precisely as at least I would like it to. But I think I have the benefit of a little bit of hindsight, and I can look back, and that's why I came up with that rule of thumb, like stick it out for a year. Like you just start a new job, a new role at a company, you're going to have bad days. And you might get sick, as you described in the Peace Corps, or you might have a bad interaction with a colleague or maybe a more senior member of your team. That's, you just anticipate going in to any experience that that rosy sheen is going to disappear pretty quickly, and then you're going to be facing the reality. So that's step number one. But then give it a fair shake. As I said, I think when it comes to a job, if I had gone to the Peace Corps and after getting sick, it wasn't the first day, but within the first month, getting, kind of significantly ill, a lot of people actually, that freaks them out. And, a third of Peace Corps volunteers don't make it through, typically because of some health related issue or concern. And in my case, I was able to, get over that hump. But on the job, I get over humps. And then, after a year, I assess, like, is this working out for me? Am I achieving my career goals? Am I satisfied? Am I enjoying it? Are we treating each other well at work? Is there this concept of kind of respectful engagement? If all those things are true, then let's sign up for another year. But if after a year, and if you're like, this is just horrible, and if you go, back to whatever your friends or your home or whatever it is, and you're sharing this with other people, and if it's just consistently, I don't like it, then have the guts to make a change. I think that's really good advice. Make that shift.
So it's guts both ways. It's guts to persevere for a year, guts to honor your commitment for a long enough period of time, and then the guts to go into the unknown. Works both ways.
Exactly.
Do you think, by the way, while you're talking, I was thinking about our kids and how perseverant they are. And I remember Jake, he wanted to quit diving. And I'm like, dude, you're going to the national championships next month. I mean, at least stick it out, because I knew he would do well in the national championships, and I knew that would get him to stick it around. So he went and he got 4th place or 6th place or something awesome. And he came, he said, okay, I want to quit. I went, whoa. What do you mean? My trick didn't work. And he went down, and Jill calls me up and she says, did you tell Jake he could quit diving? I'm like, well, I said if he goes in and shakes the coach's hand and looks the coach in the eye and thanks him for the impact, then he could do it. Again, I didn't think he'd ever do that, but sure enough, he had the guts to do that, the guts to stop, and he stuck it out for all those years to the point where he was number 4 in the nation. And I'm wondering, you think about your children, you think about my children, you think about me and you think about our parents. Do you think that perseverance is just genetic and we're not as great as we think we are? We just got lucky genes?
I don't think it's genetic. I think you probably have to be reminded of it. You have to have supporters that are whispering the right messages in your ear and encouraging you when times are tough, to stick it out, or also providing you with the guidance to say, hey, I've heard you talk about this for a long time, and the challenge that you're having right now isn't novel. Like this is, again, it's a consistent set of feedback. So yeah, it's not genetic. I think it's the environment that you're in that plays a big role there. And you're right, it does take guts sometimes to pull the cord. And again, I go back to the initial statements when I talked about, it starts with adventure, like follow your bliss, pay attention to what you're good at, pay attention to how you're feeling about it. I'm guessing the case with Jake was that while he was an elite diver, he just wasn't feeling that passion or that flow. So there you go.
Yeah. Values are passed on, and you keep bringing it up. We have the same values. If you didn't get them at home, go find somebody. I mean, we know that Jerome and I had a great home life. We know we've been very, very lucky. We know we were propelled into the future by the work of our ancestors. And if you're listening and you don't have that, we're sorry. Find somebody to be a mentor. Figure out what your values are. Sit down and think about it, because honestly, there's more people I know that are incredibly successful that come from bad backgrounds than come from good backgrounds. There's more people running away from something than running to something, like Jerome and I are. And I'm going to end with this, Jerome, and I really appreciate your time. I'd love to know, if you think back in time, what sacrifice did you make in your early 20s that you would make over and over and over again?
Well, again, I think it's the willingness to sacrifice. Exchange might be a better word than sacrifice, but the willing to pause something that's going so well, where you think like, it just doesn't get much better than this, but to get back on track with the bigger picture, with that adventure that you're pursuing, the bigger, bolder adventure. So those in my 20s, like that desire first is actually in my teens, but to say, hey, I'm not going to go to Santa Barbara. That sounds like an amazing time. I was there. I still smell the eucalyptus in my neighborhood, and I think back to those days in Isla Vista. So I know it would have been a good time, but I said, I'm going to try something different, and I did. A couple years later, I said, wow, New Orleans, I'm enjoying this so much. It can't be, much more fun than this. Let's go try Madrid for a while. I did that. And then similarly, one more time, in my 20s, still saying, hey, let's try Bolivia. And then now let's go from New York to San Francisco. It's like these types of bold decisions, they add up. I think they're what accrued to the life that I have today.
Wow. Well, thank you, Jerome,
Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for taking time away from your busy schedule to meet with your older brother of all these years and to share your insight. I got a lot of insight. I mean, we know each other pretty damn well, but I got a couple little gems that I didn't have before. Good. And I want to let you know your friends from college have been texting me. They were commenting on the photo I sent them of us doing this podcast together. They wanted me to say hi, and then they had a bunch of other things to say that I won't share with you, but I'll send you the screenshots of it.
Okay,
Have a great weekend up there in Mill Valley in the middle of the Ewok forest, and I will talk to you very soon. Love you very much, Jerome. You're a great and excellent brother.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity.